A millionaire strolls into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom as if the entire place is beneath him. He refuses to rise, refuses to answer, and refuses to respect anyone in the room. But 5 minutes later, the same man who thought he owned the world learns a truth he never expected. But the truth behind it is far deeper than a moment of arrogance. It's a story about pride, power, and the shock of finding out that money means nothing when character is missing. This is one of those rare courtroom stories where every spoken word matters, because every sentence reveals a new layer of a man who thinks wealth shields him from consequences. Judge Frank Caprio has met many characters over the years, but this one pushes the limits of patience, dignity, and justice. And it all begins with a simple act of disrespect, an act that sparks a chain reaction no one in the courtroom is prepared for. Adrian Mercer enters Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom like a king forced to visit a country he never cared about. 48 years old, worth more than anyone else in the room combined, and known across the state for his luxury real estate empire. His suit costs more than most people's monthly salary, tailored so sharply it looks like fabric carved from arrogance itself. A Gucci belt glints under the coat, and the faintest trace of a smug smile rests on his lips, as if kindness has never been part of his vocabulary. He doesn't lower his voice when he speaks into his phone. He doesn't acknowledge the bailiff asking him to silence it. Instead, Adrian continues discussing a business deal worth more than this whole courthouse, in his words. The murmurs around him grow, but he acts like none of them exist. He is called forward for his case. He doesn't move. Instead, he lifts his chin and asks, "Is the judge ready for me yet?" That is the first moment the room shifts. The disrespect hangs in the air like dust in sunlight, obvious to everyone listening. When his name is called again, Adrian steps forward with a controlled impatience, the kind rich men develop from years of always getting their way. Judge Frank Caprio welcomes him with calm professionalism. Adrian responds with indifference, eyes drifting around the courtroom like he is inspecting a property he might buy and demolish. Then the judge instructs everyone to rise. Everyone stands, except Adrian Mercer. He remains seated, legs crossed, hands folded, gaze locked directly on the judge with a look that says, "Prove to me why I should care." For a moment, the silence feels sharp enough to cut. The courtroom waits for his next move. Instead of correcting himself, Adrian leans back further in the chair. "I don't stand for people who work for me," he says. The gasp in the room is instant. Even people waiting for unrelated cases stare at him with disbelief. Judge Caprio's voice stays steady, respectful, grounded in the authority he never raises or flaunts. The judge explains that everyone stands not for a person but for the court. Adrian shrugs. "Same thing to me. It is the tone, more than the words, that sets off a quiet, collective shock. He speaks as if he owns the idea of justice, as if no rule applies to him unless he accepts it. And might a man with that mindset be hiding something far worse than disrespect? The judge gives him one more opportunity. Adrian declines again. He stays seated, defiant, almost daring someone to challenge him. And this raises a question that lingers in the air. What makes a man believe he's untouchable? Adrian's charges, multiple violations connected to illegal business operations, are serious. But what stands out more is his attitude. His voice doesn't tremble. His words don't soften. He believes wealth is a shield and that the court is nothing more than an inconvenience. The judge decides to move forward. But as the first few sentences of the case begin, Adrian interrupts for the third time, speaking loudly about how he doesn't have all day and that the court should speed this up before he calls his lawyer to end this nonsense. This moment creates a pause that changes everything. Something shifts behind Judge Caprio's calm expression, a recognition that this won't be a routine hearing. And somewhere in Adrian's confidence, a crack is forming. One small enough to ignore, but deep enough to reveal something devastating later. The chapter closes on the edge of that unraveling arrogance, and the courtroom holds its breath. But what happened next left the entire courtroom speechless. The moment Adrian Mercer refuses to stand, the atmosphere inside the courtroom changes. What begins as arrogance soon evolves into something sharper, something that hints at a story far more tangled than anyone expected. Judge Frank Caprio maintains his steady tone, asking the prosecutor to continue, but the prosecutor's first sentence sends a ripple through the room. The case isn't just about zoning violations or fines, it involves a string of luxury properties Adrian controls through shell companies, properties with suspiciously identical complaints from tenants, all related to unsafe living conditions, mold, collapsing ceilings, power outages lasting days, dozens of tenants affected, all under buildings owned by one man who never bothered to visit them. Adrian interrupts again, brushing off the claims as exaggerations from people who don't pay their rent on time. His dismissive tone echoes off the walls, harder and colder than before. To him, the complaints are nothing more than background noise, and the people suffering through them aren't worth a second thought. The prosecutor clears his throat and presents a statement from a single mother who lived in one of Adrian's buildings. Her spoken testimony reveals how she spent weeks begging management to fix a broken heating system during winter. Her final line hits the courtroom with weight. "My son slept in a coat every night." Adrian rolls his eyes. The entire courtroom shifts with disapproval, and here lies a question that quietly forms in the minds of everyone present. How far can wealth shield a man from the consequences of cruelty? Judge Caprio asks Adrian for a response. Adrian brushes aside the statement entirely. He insists he never hears about small problems and shouldn't be expected to involve himself in minor issues. Then, with a tone even more dismissive, he adds that tenants who struggle financially are lucky to live in his properties at all. The prosecutor continues with the next piece of evidence: audio of a heated conversation involving one of Adrian's building supervisors. In the recording, the supervisor admits he was instructed never to approve repairs without Adrian's personal authorization, and that Adrian rarely answers calls. Adrian's reaction is instant: that man is incompetent. None of that is true. But the prosecutor replies that 3 other supervisors gave the same account. The courtroom grows still. Something uncomfortable begins to rise to the surface, something Adrian didn't expect anyone to uncover. Then the prosecutor presents the final detail: a tenant who was injured when a staircase railing snapped. The injury left her unable to work for weeks. When she asked for help covering basic medical needs, the property office told her, "The building isn't responsible for accidents caused by tenant misuse." Adrian's voice rises, louder than before, layered with indignation. "I don't manage these things personally. People complain because they want payouts. Everyone knows that." His words fall flat. No sympathy, no concern, only dismissal. For the first time, a hint of unease flickers through the room, and it becomes clear that Adrian's refusal to stand wasn't just arrogance, it was a symptom of something deeper, a belief that he stands above any rule, any human concern, any hint of accountability. Judge Caprio asks a simple question: "Did you ever visit any of these buildings yourself?" Adrian hesitates, only for half a second. But the pause speaks louder than anything he has said so far. "I don't have time for that," he finally responds. This is the moment the courtroom realizes that his indifference has never been about efficiency. It has always been about distance. Distance from responsibility, distance from empathy, distance from the very people who live in the shadows of his wealth. And as the judge listens, something shifts in the tone of the proceedings. The first cracks in Adrian's confidence begin to widen. His posture stiffens. His voice shakes, not with fear, but with the frustration of a man unaccustomed to losing control. Every word spoken in this chapter exposes a new layer of the truth, and somewhere beneath that truth lies the turning point of the entire case. Drop a comment below if you've ever met someone who thought money made them untouchable, but the emotional storm waiting in the next moments would change the tone of the entire courtroom. The evidence hits the courtroom like steady waves, each one stronger than the last. But nothing prepares anyone for what comes next: the voice of someone who lived the consequences of Adrian Mercer's carelessness. Judge Frank Caprio Clay R's his throat and introduces a tenant who has agreed to speak. Her name is Lila Harron, a grandmother who lived in one of Adrian's oldest properties for 9 years. Her tone is soft, respectful, steady. She explains how she spent months submitting repair requests that never received a response. She describes nights when rainwater leaked through her ceiling, dripping into buckets she placed around her living room. Her story carries no anger, only quiet fatigue, and sometimes quiet truth is the loudest sound of all. As she speaks, Adrian shows no interest. His arms fold, his eyes drift, and he mutters about having more important things to do. His indifference wraps around the room like a chill, sharpening every word Lila says. She continues, describing the night she fell on the broken staircase railing. She didn't shout, she didn't dramatize it, she simply explains the pain, the fear, and the weeks she spent unable to move without help. Her closing line is almost a whisper. I didn't want money, I just wanted someone to care enough to fix the railing before someone else got hurt. For a moment, the courtroom falls into a silence so deep it feels like the building itself is holding its breath. Then Adrian laughs, a short, sarcastic laugh, not loud, but loud enough. And the room freezes. Judge Caprio turns his attention back to Adrian, asking what exactly he finds amusing. Adrian leans forward, resting his elbows on the table. This entire story is exaggerated, he answers. People like her always find a way to blame someone else for their problems. The air shifts. The kind of shift that happens when everyone realizes a line has just been crossed, not by accident, but by intention. And here rises the first rhetorical question of the chapter. What kind of man hears another person's pain and responds with mockery? Judge Caprio's voice carries a firmness that wasn't present before. He explains that the purpose of the court is to listen, to examine, and to deliver fair judgment. Adrian responds with a dismissive sigh, insisting he's too busy for emotional stories. Lila's voice wavers for the first time. She asks Adrian directly why he never spoke to any of his tenants, not even once. Adrian tilts his head, letting a faint smirk appear. Because I don't owe strangers my time, he replies. Whispers rise across the courtroom. Even those who came for minor cases shift uncomfortably in their seats. There is cruelty in Adrian's words, not sharp cruelty, but casual cruelty, the kind that reveals a lifetime of looking down on others. Judge Caprio politely thanks Lila and allows her to step back. As she returns to her seat, several people nod at her in silent support. The room feels heavier, and Adrian's confidence, though still present, begins to resemble a man clinging to a throne sinking beneath him. The prosecutor introduces one final tenant statement. This one comes from a teenage boy who lived in another of Adrian's buildings. The boy's message is short, but the spoken words carry a sting that lands right in the center of the millionaire, ego. I don't think he knows we're real people, Adrian responds instantly, snapping that he doesn't have time to worry about every kid with an opinion. A few gasps echo around the courtroom. His composure thins, and frustration slips into his voice. The judge reminds him to maintain respect, but Adrian argues again, claiming the entire hearing is a waste of his day. His arrogance continues to spill, untamed and unfiltered, and while the evidence had been shocking, it is his reaction to it, cold, mocking, detached, that pushes the tension to its highest point. The emotional storm that Judge Caprio warned himself to expect is now in full force, and everyone wonders the same thing. How low can a man like Adrian hold on to his pride before it finally shatters? Hit that subscribe button if you're following this intense courtroom showdown. But Judge Caprio's response, calm, heavy, and unforgettable, would flip the entire power dynamic in an instant. A long breath settles over the courtroom as Adrian Mercer leans back in his chair, radiating defiance. Judge Frank Caprio looks down at the documents laid before him, each page filled with violations, statements, and the echoes of lives shaped by one man's indifference. When he finally raises his head, the room senses a shift, quiet, deliberate, and heavy with meaning. Judge Caprio begins by addressing the purpose of the courtroom. Justice, he explains, is not a performance and not a negotiation. It is a responsibility, one that requires every person present to respect the process, whether they are rich, poor, frustrated, or afraid. His tone is calm, steady, almost gentle, but beneath it lies a firmness no one can ignore. Adrian sighs, rolling his eyes with impatience. His fingers tap against his designer sleeve, and he mutters loud enough for people to hear that the judge is turning this into a lecture. Judge Caprio pauses, then explains that respect is foundational, not optional. Adrian scoffs again. The judge continues anyway. He recounts each tenant's spoken testimony, summarizing the hardships described earlier. He speaks of leaky ceilings, broken heating, collapsing railings, and the injury that left a tenant unable to work. He does not dramatize. He does not exaggerate. He simply lays out the facts, and each fact is a quiet, undeniable truth. Adrian interrupts, insisting these complaints are exaggerated by people who want sympathy. Judge Caprio stops speaking. His silence is sharper than any words he could form. It stretches across the room like a final warning. Then his voice returns, low and unw. Avering, Mr. Mercer, the measure of a person is not how much they own, but how they treat the people whose lives are touched by their decisions. A murmur stirs across the courtroom. Adrian stiffens, but he remains unbothered, or tries to. His jaw tightens as the judge continues. You have built a successful life, but success without humanity is an empty victory. Adrian laughs again, though the sound is now forced. I don't need moral lessons. I need this over with. The judge asks him why he refuses to acknowledge any responsibility for the condition of his buildings. Adrian responds with irritation, claiming he can't possibly track every complaint personally. Judge Caprio counters by asking why he never hired competent managers, or why he ignored repeated reports from the supervisors he did employ. Adrian snaps, because I can't trust anyone to do the job right. And suddenly, a deeper truth emerges, one Adrian never intended to reveal. His need for control, his towering ego, his inability to delegate without suspicion. All of it begins to unravel into something raw and unfiltered. How can a man fix a collapsing world around him when he refuses to admit he ever built it wrong in the first place? The judge asks whether Adrian has visited any of the properties in the last year. Adrian admits he has not. He claims he's simply too busy. Judge Caprio explains that leadership requires presence, compassion, and accountability. Without them, harm is not an accident, it is a result. Adrian's temper finally cracks. He raises his voice, insisting the tenants complaining are ungrateful and that he provides more opportunities than most landlords ever do. But every word sounds less convincing than the last. His confidence is unraveling thread by thread, revealing the insecurity beneath the swagger. Judge Caprio's tone deepens. Those opportunities mean nothing if the people living in your buildings cannot feel safe. Responsibility is not something you step around, Mr. Mercer. It's something you stand up for. The word stand lingers in the air like a challenge the millionaire still refuses to meet. And what is dignity worth if a man refuses to rise even for the values he claims to uphold? Judge Caprio finally announces that he will deliver a decision after reviewing one final matter, Adrian's conduct in the courtroom itself. His refusal to stand, his repeated interruptions, his disregard for the court, for the community, and for the people affected by his choices. The tension grows heavier with each passing second. Something profound is about to unfold, something no one, not even Adrian, is prepared for. Like this video if you believe respect is earned through actions, not bank accounts, but the judge's next words would send shockwaves through the courtroom and end Adrian's arrogance in a way he never saw coming. The courtroom holds its collective breath. Adrian Mercer sits stiffly, chest puffed up, still refusing to rise. Judge Frank Caprio leans forward slightly, voice calm but filled with undeniable authority. He recounts once more the defiance, the arrogance, and the dismissive laughter that has filled the room. Then he delivers the words that change everything. Mr. Mercer, you will rise. The simplicity of the command strikes like a bell. Adrian glares, lips pressed tight, a mix of anger and disbelief etched across his expensive, well-groomed face. He mutters something under his breath, a half-hearted protest about being above this nonsense. But the judge does not flinch. 5 seconds to rise, Judge Caprio adds, and the silence that follows is deafening. Adrian does not move, not an inch. The court waits, tense, knowing the next 5 minutes will define the rest of his life. The bailiffs approach, calm, professi. Onal, unshakable. 1 step, 2 steps. The judge says nothing. He simply watches. Then, after a few seconds, Adrian laughs. A haughty, sharp sound. You wouldn't dare, he says. The bailiff replies in a quiet, steady voice. Sir, you are required to comply. Stand, or we will assist you. The millionaire's confidence falters. He looks around at the courtroom, eyes darting between the judge, the bailiffs, and the tenants who have braved months of fear and discomfort. The room holds him in its silent judgment. No money can buy the respect in this room. No titles, no wealth, no empire can shield him here. 5 seconds pass, then 10. Adrian's body tenses. He is pulled up forcibly yet respectfully by 2 bailiffs. The court gasps, whispers ripple through the room, and Adrian's face turns crimson with rage and humiliation. This is the first time anyone has forced him to acknowledge a reality outside of his wealth, that he is equal under the law. Judge Caprio's eyes remain steady. He speaks again, this time not as a prosecutor, but as a teacher. Mr. Mercer, respect is not granted by money. It is given by character. Today you learn that lesson. The room exhales collectively. Some faces smile, some shake their heads in disbelief. Adrian remains silent, his pride wounded, but his lesson carved deeply into the very air he breathes. Then comes the final moment. Judge Caprio issues a ruling that combines justice with accountability. Adrian must personally fund repairs, compensate the tenants, and attend a community service program where he will meet the people affected by his properties. The courtroom nods in quiet satisfaction. Justice has been served, and it is not empty, it is meaningful. For the first time, Adrian looks at those around him without a mask. Perhaps there is recognition, or perhaps just resignation. Either way, the arrogance that carried him through decades of success is shattered, leaving only a man forced to confront the consequences of his actions. One of the tenants, the grandmother Lila Harron, smiles softly. Her eyes glisten with quiet triumph. She whispers to a friend, finally. And indeed, finally. Karma has arrived in a way everyone can understand. Swift, undeniable, and perfectly measured. Judge Caprio rises, calls the court adjourned, and the sound of gavel hitting wood echoes like a drumbeat of victory for fairness. The courtroom empties slowly, the memory of Adrian Mercer's defiance lingering as a lesson for anyone who believes money can replace humanity. The final rhetorical question hangs in the air. When arrogance meets accountability, who truly wins? Hit that subscribe button if you love courtroom stories where justice prevails. Like this video, ring the bell for more stories, and share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that character always outshines cash. And as Adrian leaves the courtroom, humbled and silent, the ripple of this moment spreads far beyond the walls of the building, proving that true power lies not in wealth, but in respect earned and justice upheld.